Hi everyone, this is a video that effectively tries to highlight some of the pitfalls and traps that we all might encounter and that I have encountered when trying to buy not just a book, but the right edition of a book. So the book in question is Hobbes' Leviathan, and I got this from my local library, and that is the Hackett edition from 1994, and this is edited and with an introduction by an Edwin Curley, with his real name, who is or was a professor of philosophy at the University of Michigan. And also in my library was this, which is the Oxford World Classics version. But it was out on loan at the time, so I went and put my money down on the table, as it were, to buy this, brand new. And so this is basically kind of there's two or three parts to what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about how we might go about buying a book and literally what we might encounter. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the contents of the book, a little bit about it. That's going to involve and include some really interesting stuff. That's some of it's going to be to do with book printing back in the 17th century. And then a bit later, and towards the end, at some point anyway, I'll be introducing another mug in the little mini mug collection that I evidently seem to have. So, okay, to start with, how to choose between, for example, there's a Penguin, there's a Penguin Classics version, and there's also a Cambridge Texts in the History of Political Thought version. So which one to get? Well, one of the ways, evidently, you could go by buying books is just simply going by the number of pages, which obviously doesn't appear to be a very good idea. Buying one's art by the number of pages. But that's what I did buying this, because you'll see page numbers for various editions of books. So this one I think is advertised, or one of them is advertised at 576 pages. One of them might be 600 and something or other pages. And this one is advertised, the Oxford is advertised at 832 pages. So heck, this must have lots more new stuff from somewhere about something. Well, does it though? I mean, literally does it? And one of the first points to say about this is this was originally written in English. A Latin edition was written by Hobbes somewhat later, but the English edition was first published in 1651, and the Latin version didn't follow until 1668. So what do we need what's the editor for? What's he all about? Well, this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about a bit later. But also one of the features of this kind of thing. I mean, what you get is explanatory notes, footnotes, endnotes, and the full academic apparatus for a text like this, an important work. Well, okay, so I picked this one up first. I'm looking through. I turn to chapter, what page opened, and had a look at it. And straight away, there's footnote. Okay, but what that footnote actually is instead of being kind of like part of the academic apparatus that is somehow explaining the text or whatever it might be, that's pertinent to the text. That footnote is just a commentary. And, well, when I first read it, I wouldn't have said it's just a commentary. I would have said, wow, this is fantastic. I thought, incredible. What the commentary says is just, it's impossible to get it from reading the text. And I read that page, and then over the page, and over the page, and no. How does he get that? He gets that because he's a professor. And it seems to be incredibly material and pertinent and significant. So instantly I'm thinking, what the hell did I buy this for? What a mug, to coin a phrase. Fortunately, it wasn't absurdly expensive, so I'm telling myself that never mind, maybe I can send it back, and it'll only cost me £3 to send it back, or maybe I can sell it on eBay or something, or whatever it is, or maybe I'll keep it. But this has a happy ending. So, what's the academic apparatus like in this one? Well, to begin with, not very good. There doesn't appear to be so much of it. And what there is of it doesn't seem to be particularly important. I mean, that for that chapter 25 about counsel in here, there's nothing. Literally, absolutely nothing. It gives this fantastic, suddenly reference to and meaning, and there's nothing in chapter 25. So, yeah. However, one of the things that this book has, both editions have, is at the back there's an appendix, and it's something like a translation of that later Latin version, or rather, it's it is. Okay, so the extra page numbers, unfortunately, that is just that, the translation from the Latin version in full, and 16 pages. 16 only to the text, 1-6. They both have chapter 1, 2, and 3. But whereas that one has 9 and 47 and some of the one other, this one has 42. And I'm looking at 42 and thinking, this is about religion, and it's only about religion. And chapter 9 isn't about religion at all. And right at the back, kind of like opening the book and reading it backwards, sort of thing, there's an index of biblical citations. Pages of it, biblical citations, Old and New Testament. And then, yeah. So what this edition began to appear to have was that the end notes and is commentary, and it's usually commentary about religion. So, is that quite so tremendously significant or profound? Well, I'm thinking, hey, it's the 17th century, so religion is central, but of course it's also very central to America, and this guy is American, funnily enough. Can that really be the reason? Well, it could be. So, who's this guy then? So Noel Malcolm studied history and English literature at Cambridge University and was knighted in 2014 for various things to do with scholarship and the like. So what's his academic apparatus? And it seems to be very kind of literary. At first I thought, this is like some guy whose subject is more kind of English language and English literature rather than, I don't know, philosophy and therefore kind of religion. And he kind of says nice, interesting neat little things that, well, in chapter 25, it didn't seem to be very important. I mean, we've got a line that's that says, he that commandeth pretendeth thereby his own benefit. Whereas the Latin version has, he that commandeth requires the thing to be done for his own benefit. That's it. Okay, yeah. Well, so things are not really kind of going very well at this point, sort of thing. You know, I really have taken my £9.50 and kind of sort of wasted some of it. But he gets better, and it kind of, like it says in the intro at some point, you can get used to the apparatus, as it were. The neat thing that this has that the Hackett doesn't have is clear markings about the difference between the first English edition and then the later Latin edition. Because what they've done is they've taken lines from the Latin edition and put it into the text, and then given the translation, or rather, no, that's the wrong way around. They've got they've given the Latin version of it in the footnote, not an endnote, the footnote right in front of you. And the more you read of those, the better it gets, kind of thing. But then there are also clearly marked elements that were not included in the Latin version at all, and that text does appear in here. And you can see it's highlighted. Nice, you know, it's not obtrusive or anything, but you can see the yeah. It's marked like with little quote marks, but not the same as quote marks. So things are kind of picking up for this new Oxford version, and it is ever so new. This particular one that looks like that in kind of blue, yeah, blue, is from 2024, and it does say it offers a definitive text drawn from more than 20 years of research by Noel Malcolm, who is evidently a Knight of the Realm as well. And okay, so yeah, well, how it works out is that in actual fact, a lot of the footnotes are not really just minor things, that they are quite meaningful and significant. And it kind of, everything is sort of brought together. And I can see how they're how they're saying it's kind of the definitive text, as it were. And this leads on to what I wanted to say about how the book was made in the first place. Because we're in an age where, for instance, it seems as if Thomas Hobbes wrote his book in manuscript form to begin with. Before it gets anywhere near any printers, he has to write it out. And apparently he had dreadful handwriting. So when in Paris, he got a guy, a kind of a scribe, to write out the whole thing in fairly nice handwriting, for starters. And then he had another version made up that was called a presentation version. And that presentation version, and I'm just going to, or maybe I'm going to leave that to the end. I'll get to the relevance of the presentation version and the significance of it, which is, yeah, that's where it is. Okay, so what's the big deal about this book anyway? Hobbes. Perhaps everyone has heard of Thomas Hobbes and his Leviathan, and perhaps most of us have heard something or other to do with how life is short and brutal, brutish, or something, and maybe that everyone is at war with everyone else, or something like that. Apparently, but it says on the back cover that Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan is not just one of the greatest philosophical texts in the English language. It is one of the most important works in the history of Western political thought. Little did I know. I mean, everyone kind of talks about Locke and Hobbes and Hume and Adam Smith and then various Europeans, obviously the French guys, Voltaire and Rousseau and Diderot and the Germans, and etc. And the Enlightenment book by Robertson gives us more than enough names to cope with. So what I want to talk about first is a little bit about Thomas Hobbes, the person. His origins were quite modest. His point number one. He's born in 1588, part of an extended family of local cloth makers and glovers, some of whom were quite prominent in local life, but his own father was the least distinguished of them, being the curate of a poor parish just outside the town of Malmesbury in Wiltshire. Evidently, Thomas Hobbes is mega smart and ends up at Cambridge, aged about 20 or so. And his first substantial work was a complete translation of Thucydides. And the Hackett edition is no slouch when it comes to this sort of thing. And I think it's probably pretty good, but nonetheless, what he has here is, before he discovered geometry, he translated Thucydides. And what he learned about human nature from the close study of Greek history left a deep imprint on his later work. We will see many examples as we proceed from our account of the argument. Yeah. But that leads on, in a way, to the production of this book. It is a general rule when studying books produced in the era of handwriting, including the 17th century, that no two copies of the same edition can be assumed to be entirely identical. Printers would commonly interrupt the printing of a sheet, inspect the text, and make small corrections, with the result that any given page might exist in uncorrected or corrected states, and the latter sometimes in more than one phase of correction. Each eventual copy of the book would typically be a random assortment of these, so editors have to collate multiple copies to identify the corrections. Sometimes, however, the printer would produce a small number of presentation copies on better quality paper, often with wider margins. This would typically be done at the end of the print run of each sheet to incorporate the corrections. Crook, who happens to be the publisher, did this, producing large paper copies, called large paper copies, some of which are known to have been presented by Hobbes to friends and patrons. The present edition is based on the copy he sent to the famous lawyer and scholar John Selden, which is in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. But even such a copy is not problem-free. Pieces of type could drop out unnoticed during the printing process, and sometimes a would-be correction made during that process was botched, creating a further error. The general collation of copies makes it possible to identify these cases. They are corrected in this edition. And I might also add that this is based, the full version is the Clarendon edition in 3 volumes. And this is obviously an easier and cheaper a version of all that. But nonetheless, there it is. There's there's a lot to it, and without even really kind of trying to make your way into the text and into what this guy is talking about, and how on earth it's an important work of Western political thought, which apparently it is. But if we can avoid that and kind of go down the pub in a way, in the 17th century, that this is my other mug. There he is, and as far as I know, this is probably a fairly recent kind of like a copy of what looks to me like a pretty old mug, a nice old kind of handle there, and and it just reminds me of the kind of thing, probably not nowadays. You're not likely to see anybody in your local Wetherspoons or something. But for me, a few years ago, you might have found an old boy at the end of the bar drinking a draft out of something like this. This is a pewter mug. It says on the bottom it's fine English pewter. No, it says fine British pewter, made in Sheffield, classically, made in Sheffield, England. And there it is. A real pewter mug. That's what it kind of sounds like. So it's not it's very light, very lightweight. Perhaps the kind of thing that might have been knocking around in the 17th century, and not just the middle to late 20th century. So yeah. After a hard night's reading, maybe some all students need a light relief of some description. So maybe that is just the job. So anyway, cheers, and well, bye for now.